For those who are new to the organization, the New Jersey Food Processors Association is a community of food and beverage companies, suppliers, and service organizations that promote industry growth throughout the Garden State region through education, resource sharing, and strong membership partnerships. I think today we have an interesting program for you, combining the government representing the agricultural component of the supply chain, along with pieces related to ensuring a secure inventory, ISO requirements, auditing, and more. So I'll give you a brief introduction of some of the speakers on the panel today. First, Jennifer Lott. She's the Food and Safety Auditing, Pharma, Cosmetics, and Personal Care Technical Director at SGS North America, supporting quality, integrity, and efficacy of pharmaceutical, cosmetics, and personal care products. She's an accredited lead auditor and trainer with over 25 years of experience in quality and safety management system development, consulting, packaging, and laboratory management. She has a tremendous expertise across all levels of auditing. Jennifer will provide great insight about the best practices for guidance and how to continue business in the midst of the crisis we're in. Also, I'm excited that we have Secretary Doug Fisher with us. He was confirmed by John Corzine as Secretary of Agriculture in February 2009. Early in his career, Secretary Fisher served in the New Jersey National Guard, had a 30-year career as a supermarket owner, operator, was elected to the Assembly. Previously in his role as state legislator, his accomplishments are many. Prime sponsor of the law banning the harvesting of horseshoe crabs, and the lead on the bill to limit the use of handheld cell phones in motor vehicles. Very interesting. With Secretary Fisher is Joe Atchison, the Director of Marketing and Development for New Jersey Department of Agriculture. Joe has been with the NJDA 15 years after serving as an account exec for the ad agency that serviced the Jersey Fresh account. NJDA administers the Jersey Fresh program, organic certification, dairy licensing, USDA, FSMA, and FDA inspections, and several equine programs. Secretary Fisher and Joe Atchison will help address the impact of the coronavirus on the supply chain from an agricultural perspective. So with that said, I will let Jennifer take the floor and lead off with her program.
Thank you. So I just wanted to take a brief moment and talk about what comes after the pandemic. So before COVID-19, New Jersey faced Hurricane Sandy, which caused production halts, and then we have the pandemic. And as we move forward and we look at these disruptions, we may want to take a step back and say, how do we best prepare ourselves for the next disruption we face? Fortunately for us, the International Standards Organization published in February of this year ISO 22313, which is Security and Resilience Business Continuity Management Systems, for us to be able to use as guidance on how we make our companies more resilient and able to bounce back when we have these disruptions that interrupt our services. The concept behind continuity planning is that it gives the company the tools to evaluate and continually improve your business. But even what's more important, what 22313 says is that when you have a disruption, that it's really important to focus on the impact of the disruption, not why the disruption happened. Because if we focus on that impact, we're able to pivot and make the changes we need to get back to operation and supplying our customers quicker than if we're focusing on, why it happened. So that's one of the key things that I want to take away is that, yes, we've had this major disruption. We've been talking and going to webinars all about how to be prepared and do the sanitation and cleaning and the people piece of COVID-19. This is how you take a step back and say, how do I make myself better so that my company can go through the next one? Because disruptions are a way of life now. It's no longer the one-off thing that happens. Any questions?
No, Jen, I have a quick question. Before COVID-19, New Jersey faced Hurricane Sandy, which caused a production halt. Now, what type of playbook do we have now? Do we have one now with COVID-19, or we're going to be, better prepared? I know as a guy who manages relationships for other companies, we've done our best to kind of give them, a playbook, what to expect from their banks. But is there one in which companies, now can lean upon to help them through, as you said, COVID-19 is just the latest in disruptions, in supply chain. Are they going to be ready for the next one?
That's why I was suggesting that we look at the 22313 standard that was published by ISO this spring. It really helps guide through what business continuity is and how companies can become more resilient. So it's a wonderful document to have in your back pocket so that you can be better prepared for the next time the disruption occurs. And when I think about business continuity, I want to kind of refer to that we all know as part of our GFSI certifications, we have to do a mock recall, test every year so that we know what to do if we were in a recall situation. By having a business continuity plan and testing that continuity plan, it helps you be more prepared. And I could go out to a client I was working with a few years ago who manufactured packaging for a major beverage manufacturer. And each year at the end of the year, their senior vice president made up a crisis and had all the plants in his organization react to this crisis. So one year he said, a tornado came through the town and ripped the roof off. So I need you to think about what happens to the packaging, what happens to this, what happens to that. How do we keep our major beverage customer in packaging so that they can continue producing? So they went through, they worked through their plan, they had great solutions. Lo and behold, the next spring, a tornado came through town and ripped the roof off of one of their plants. So they'd already practiced and they knew what they needed to do. And that's why continuity planning is so important, so that you think about these disruptions or things that could happen and how you react to them. And when we think about disruptions, one more comment is that we have predictable disruptions and then we have unpredictable. So if you have a labor union, a predictable disruption would be, how do we react if the union goes on strike and we don't have a workforce? Whereas with COVID-19, with Sandy, those were pretty much unpredictable and we didn't really, think about it until it was upon us and it was happening.
Thank you.
Oops. Any other questions about that? Another question that we get often asked with SGS is, what about food security and food safety? How do they work and how do we react? From my perspective as the technical manager and experience as an auditor, food safety doesn't get a day off because of the shift in focus to food security. They're really a handshake. You can't have food security if you don't have food safety. So within SGS about 2 years ago, we developed a tool called the Business Enhancement Tool. We call it BE. And what Business Enhancement allows us to do is to look at audits that are performed worldwide and say, what are the top issues that companies are facing in audits? So what are the top nonconformances? And we can be as global as worldwide, what is the #1 nonconformance for SQF certification? Or we could say, what is the #1 nonconformance for SQ certification in Southern New Jersey? We could be that specific. And I found it quite interesting that when I looked at worldwide under FSSC 22000 standard GFSI, the #1 nonconformity identified worldwide was personnel hygiene, which I thought is quite telling because that should be one of the easiest ones to fix, right? The people out there working on your floor. And what we found is that it is, are they wearing their hair nets and beard nets correctly? Are they washing their hands? Are they taking their lab coats off before they go to the restroom? Are they wearing jewelry where they shouldn't be wearing jewelry? Chewing gum, eating things on the floor, and drinks, and those types of things. So as the #1 nonconformity that we found in that, in that standard, that things that people are doing to get that failure feed right into some of the things that we're trying to fix with food security and COVID-19 changes, correct?
Right.
Right. So that was just interesting that when we looked at that, that's what we found as the number one non-conformity with food safety.
So when you take a look at your site audits, so what are, I guess, is there a common theme that a food manufacturer, precautions they may miss, and then take it a step further, those missed perhaps by warehouses, which could make either of those segments vulnerable?
Good question. And besides that personal hygiene, when we looked at the data from the business enhancement engine, we found that there were a handful of other common nonconformities. One of them was calibration. Calibration of measuring and monitoring equipment, it's pretty darn important because oftentimes we're relying on those pieces of equipment to be part of our critical control points in our risk assessment. So we find that the calibration of equipment sometimes isn't where it should be. The records aren't there. And I would say the number one finding in that region is that clients don't give themselves permission to make a decision about the product that's been made when something is found to be out of calibration. So if you find that a piece of equipment isn't working or it's out of calibration, as an organization, you need to give yourself permission to say, we will look at other data and determine if that whole quarter worth of measurements we took are suspect, or because some other tests or testing we did down the line, we know that that was just one piece of it, and we don't have to do a recall or be worried about the conformity of the finished good. Another one is traceability. Now we know in the world of food, if you don't have traceability, you might as well just shut your doors, because you need to be able to trace your products from raw materials forward and from finished product backwards. And we find that the number 3 nonconformity was on traceability, making sure that they understood every aspect of traceability and were able to document the lot numbers and all the information that's necessary. Because when you have to do a recall, that is the first thing you're going to go to is traceability, to understand where the materials came from and if there were any issues with that. I think the last one I'll talk about, which ties into the warehouse as well, is measures to prevent cross-contamination was another nonconformity. And when we talk about cross-contamination, we're talking about foreign materials, we're talking about pest control, we're talking about allergens, we're talking about, chemicals. And those are areas where clients struggle somewhat. So making sure that if you have allergens in your house, that you have them segregated so there's no risk of cross-contamination. And the same thing about chemicals. Certain chemicals need to be stored under lock and key. Others can be kept in places where people can get to them and use them. So make sure you understand the materials that are in your house and how you're managing them so that your finished product doesn't become cross-contaminated.
Wow, a lot more goes into it than one may think.
Exactly.
All right. Are there any other questions? That was it.
I think
that was interesting.
One other comment I'll make is I realize that in Jersey you have a number of fresh produce warehouses and storage. So from the perspective of fresh produce, it can be seen as high risk. And those risks mainly associated with foreign materials again. So we can think about insects, rock, dirt, twigs, and possible pesticides. But as the person who's receiving the produce that's already grown, you really can't control what comes in with the produce you're receiving, but you can control what's in your warehouse. So again, it's making sure you have a good pesticide program or pest control program, making sure that you have good cleaning and sanitation and housekeeping in those programs, because you're only as good as the house you keep.
And one question, which is a kind of a curious question for me, and then we'll transition over, is we have a lot of food processors in our bank portfolio. And one of the things that came up in probably the May timeframe is the consumer was going to the store, shopping on the periphery of the store for the fruits and vegetables, but there was some consternation that COVID could be transmitted could be on the fruit some way, somehow. Do you see that taking a step further? So that, when you talk to, maybe some of your customers talk to the consumer, is that still an issue, or is that just something that, as more education got pushed out, that's not a concern on the consumer's part, that, some of our food supply could be contaminated?
I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said with education, it's not so much a concern now. When COVID, became something we began talking about in late February and March, everyone was like, oh my gosh, where did this come from? How is it going to impact? Because, the numbers were so high of people that were losing their lives to the infection. So everybody just kind of jumped to the extreme and thought, I could get this from anywhere. Now with the education, it's clearly stated on the FDA website that it's not transmitted through food or packaging or things like that. I think people are calming down about it. I still, as a food safety professional, say, wash your produce before you eat it. It's always a good idea to wash everything before you eat it. But I do believe that that is no longer a high-ranking concern of consumers.
Okay. Well, good. Jennifer, thank you again. And again, if there are any questions, we can certainly get them to Jennifer and she can answer. But let's transition over to Secretary Fisher and Mr. Atchison. But one thing, I know you have maybe some set items you want to talk about. One of the things that I thought would be worth talking about at some point, over your next couple minutes, is the New Jersey Hemp Farming Act, enacted in the third quarter, I think, of last year. And we're looking to use the agricultural benefits of hemp to make that a nice export product in the state. So maybe, along with the other items you're going to talk about, we can touch on that.
Sure, I'll touch on that in a minute. First, I want to congratulate the food processors for operating in these extraordinary times. I mean, it's some of the most difficult and challenging situations that anybody could face. And I think you're all doing an extraordinary, great job. Michelle, I noticed that you mentioned, but you said that one of the biggest things was non-conforming was the fact that the workers themselves need to go through more protocols and make sure that they do the things that are necessary at the plants. And I think what's interesting about that is before it was about workers making sure that they were not, contaminating or polluting the process. But now it's also the biggest threat is to themselves as well. To make sure that all these conditions are met. Does that factor in? And now I'll go on to what I had to say.
It does factor in, because when we look at how companies are operating today, we see that there are very good measures taken. Some plants where people have to be very close to each other, they put screens up, plexiglass screens between the workers so they can stand where they need to stand on the line to do their job, and that they have a bit of that social distancing like we see when we go to the bank or to the grocery store and we're paying for doing our transactions. So yes, making sure that the employees stay safe is just as important, because without our employees doing the work, we're not going to have food and there'll be no food security.
Right, but what I meant was it's now easier to convey that message because they have a stake and an interest.
It very much is, yes.
Right. So the Department of Health, as everyone knows, is the sole arbiter in terms of what's happening with food safety right now during COVID. So it's a very streamlined process. The Commissioner of Health, it's a straight line down through all the departments, and then the departments go back up through her division of the Department of Health. And then it runs to the administration where they go through some of the legal questions, and then it comes back down. So as it relates to food safety during the pandemic, of course, I just say that because no matter who you call, ultimately health is going to make that decision on what's available. And you've seen the governor at the various conferences doing his directive, EOs, executive orders. You try to figure out what it is that's necessary and what you can and can't do. So as to us, let me just say, first of all, I have a long association with the Food Processors Association, and we're delighted in any way we can to help facilitate issues that you're having or some questions, to get them to the right channels if helpful. During the pandemic, we had Sam Pepitone. He called us about a certain issue with his plant. We were able to move that to the right place to get some decisions. We work with any number of you, making these connections to our farmers as well. So we have 9,900 farms in the state. And we have some very large commercial operators, some very, as you all know, that are producing some of the top commodities in the country in terms of ranking, 4 in peppers, 5 in blueberries, and a whole number of other crops. So I guess what I really wanted to tell you is that as for food safety, our department, we early on, it's about maybe 3-4 years ago when they started talking about FSMA, we decided to take that in-house through the Department of Agriculture rather than the Department of Health, where it is in many states. We did that because we knew that we would have the best connection to our farming community and to help them that we've worked with farmers and to stress the importance of making sure that our farmers get food safety audits. So we have consistently led the country in terms of our audits, making sure that the farmers are having products that are going through the various stages, that they know what's expected of them, and to help them look. Originally we had some preliminary audits just to help them prepare to understand where they might not even be seeing something, that how important it is to you in the supply chain. So yes, the first thing we want to do is make sure that when the product comes to you, you have as much confidence as you can possibly have, as much as you can possibly have, to know that we are deadly serious about making sure that farmers, do these protocols. And in the beginning, it wasn't so easy. Many farmers just said, "Well, I've been supplying this person or that company. They know our standards." And we said, "Well, right now, as far as you know, the longer we stay at this, the more they'll be asking you for those certifications and those audits." So we're very proud of the fact that our record is one of consistently making sure that that farmers, adhere to and comply in every way possible. And we do that in cooperation with Rutgers. Their program, they working hand in glove, hand together, together to make sure of that. So I would say to you that as far as the department, we kind of stop at the door of when food processing is starting. Our job is to make sure that the product that gets to you is as pristine as we can possibly be able to provide. And then, of course, we don't go into these plants that way. That's when health comes in. And so I'm delighted to be here today to talk about these issues. But I thought before I went into hemp, I would introduce Joe, who's going to just kind of expand upon what I just said a little bit. And then we'll come back to hemp, if that's okay with you, Bill.
Sounds good. Okay, so piggybacking on what the Secretary and Jennifer both said, the safety of the farm labor is crucial in the supply chain with regards to we saw it especially from the Midwest with the meat packing and processing facilities, and how there was an interruption in the supply chain there. So maintaining those healthy practices is definitely important. I was just at the supermarket today or yesterday, and the toilet paper is back, the bottled water is back. The meat cases were largely full, but there's a premium on the meat still, and just to a large extent the produce shelves were pretty full. We're proud of the fact in New Jersey that a lot of our growers are able to pick, pack, and ship within a day or two, and a lot of them do have their own shipping abilities. So we're able to get stuff to a population of approximately 21 million people with, right within a couple hours drive of us. Each week, and I see Doyen from EDA on the attendee list here. We participate in a call regarding supply chain with the EDA. On that call is the New Jersey Food Council, Conrail, the port, the New Jersey, the Port Authority is on there, along with several departments within the state. And we talk about issues that we're seeing, issues that have been resolved. And by and large, right now, what we're hearing is, as far as the supply chain goes, things are greatly improved. There's minor interruptions. Some of the trucking issues have been largely resolved. Conrail is reporting full capabilities now, where they had some people that were out with illness issues. They're fully staffed now. The Port Authority is operating at relatively full capacity or full ability. So things are definitely improving from where they were even just 3 weeks ago, and we like to continue to see that. And as the Secretary said, we lead on food safety, so that way we make sure that we're up to date with all that. We conducted the on-farm readiness reviews prior to the the full launch of FSMA, which allowed our farmers to have a little head start and be ready for when the actual audits took place. So those are the primary things that, especially in regards to supply chain that I wanted to mention.
Okay, well, before I go to hemp, is there anyone that has any questions that we, possibly could provide any kind of a response that you're looking for in terms of what the Department of Agriculture does? Now, I will also say that once again, sometimes when we hear of things, like we've worked with any number of you over the years on some specific issues, not necessarily related to food safety, but we're an open door. We operate actually very entrepreneurially when we're talking about making sure that our food processors find the materials, the raw materials that they can, if they're being grown in the state as to product. And then of course, if there's other issues once in a while, as I said, I remember during the beginning of COVID, I got a call from one of the milk haulers out west, and they said, we're concerned, it's COVID and we can't get into the state because we don't think we're allowed to operate our rolling stock during the emergency night hours. And I said, absolutely, go ahead, you can do that. And it gave them a sigh of relief. So once in a while, although we don't have that direct responsibility, we can help provide some answers that maybe you would have some difficulty getting. Not that I don't want to be a call center, but I know that there's many times that we have been able to help, and we're delighted to do it. Another was, frankly, was moving bees at night. When COVID first hit, they thought they couldn't attend to their bees that were near some of the places where the workers were. And we said, no, you absolutely can go in and take care of that. So you never know how these things work about. But I don't want to give any false sense of notion that, when it comes to absolutely where COVID goes, you're working with CISA, you're working with CDC, and you're working with the Department of Health, I think, in our state, who then talks to the state police, and the state police are the sole enforcers of that. So if you were to have an issue where it had to do with operations and how, but you're really talking about, as Michelle opened up, you were really talking about this situation and others when a crisis hits, how to respond and how to look to the future. And the future is not going to be anything like we had in the last several years. It's going to be, these disruptions I think are here to stay for quite some time. But I think that, we all find a way. Originally it was PPE. No one could get any. The governor scrambled. He was buying it from everywhere. You all were scrambling. And I think PPE is largely not really the issue now that it was just a few weeks ago. By the way, lastly, I felt it was very interesting. You all were going to have your convention the day that at the height of this thing, right? It was going to be March 13th. So that must have been a striking time coming to the realization that suddenly that, everything was changing and you couldn't even have the convention. So, but anyway, are there anything that anybody wanted to ask? We'll be certainly glad to take that question if there is one.
And if you come up with questions afterwards, I'm happy to have the coordinator of this meeting send out my email address as well. If you have anything, you can shoot us an email after the fact as well. I do see a couple questions down the webinar chat side, and I don't know, if who wants to address all of these, but let's see. Do you have suggestions or advice for food processors on how to better work with farmers, packaging suppliers, and storage warehouses who have a basic knowledge of food safety, perhaps AIB certifications, but not GFSI certifications, but are not as well versed in FSMA regulations? Sometimes long-standing relationships make it a challenge to push for improvement and compliance with food law. Well, yeah, I certainly understand the long-standing relationships, but if you want to make sure that you're compliant and you have traceability, and you're going to have to. I think the secretary sort of alluded to it. Some of the growers were a little apprehensive at first and figured that they could just keep doing what they were always doing, but they've certainly warmed to the idea as they get more and more requests for these, to make sure that everybody's in compliance and being able to be traced for the food safety aspect.
I would say sometimes it's just bringing those parties together in sort of a holistic manner. I remember several years ago, we had a very large aggregator that wanted to deal with farmers in the Garden State, because obviously we're in the midst of this huge market, and we have some fabulous growers who really, all they really want to do is just grow. They just want to grow product. And sometimes, that's where that sort of stops. And we're saying, no, if you really want to do the business that you need to do, we will help facilitate so you'll have a better understanding. So the aggregator, who in this case was basically a shipper, a worldwide shipper, who did their own aggregating and then shipping, they didn't have the exact connections that they thought they had. And we were able to do that and make some phenomenal partnerships that have lasted and endured. So we're very happy to do that, especially if we know what it is you're trying to source.
And Jennifer, I'm sorry.
Jennifer,
I see you started to reply to that as I was reading the question, so I apologize for.
That's quite all right. I just wanted to toss out there that, SGS has had a tremendous amount of companies come to us with this very question, because GFSI or certification doesn't fit for every company because of size or whatever the reasoning is, but you want to make sure that the product you're getting is safe. So we are doing a tremendous amount of GMP, good manufacturing practices at companies that are processing food, or even to the point of good agricultural practices, GAP practices for those farmers, so that we can help them understand what they need to do to make sure that the food they're producing is contamination free and safe to move on to the next step. And it's all part of our conformance assessment or supplier assessment program that we have in place. So thank you.
Yeah, and we see ourselves as we make connections, right? We're not in business, we're government. All we want to do is promote the parties that need to come together and be able to present and to have an understanding. So our whole goal, obviously we're not going to say use this company or that company, but we'll suggest to everyone that these are the people you might want to talk to, because they have that expertise, and then we sort of step out and make, as I said, we make connections, and sometimes people just don't know where to turn, and Jennifer's a good example of that.
All right, I don't see any other questions currently sitting on the chat, so I don't know if you want to return back to the hemp question, Secretary, but
Sure.
Unless somebody else has something else.
So about 3-4 years ago, I was noticing that hemp was coming into the front, and of course, they have a close association with some of the folks that are marijuana growers. It's kind of interconnected. It's the same plant, but they're completely different industries. And so what we did was we went around the country. I sent Joe Zotowski, who was head of plant in our department, went to seminars out in Colorado, went to Kentucky. And so as a result, we fashioned, when the USDA, after the pilot program, said you can have a program where you could grow it in your state, not as a pilot. That's what we went after. And we had one of the first 3 plans in the country that was adopted by the USDA. So it's in place now. We have a director. What we're looking for is exactly what you do, which is processing. So the growing is, there's a lot of people that are growing it, but unless they have enough people that are processors that can convert that product to what the end user is looking for, there's places where they've lost money, obviously, growing hemp because they couldn't get the processing where they needed to go. So hemp is about 25,000 products that you can use for hemp, CBD oil. The whole plant obviously is everything, whether it's building materials, whether it's therapeutic or some of the holistic products, whether it's clothing. There's a whole opportunity out there that we think, and so we jumped in, and what we've learned is what we thought, which is, and not what we've learned, what we know, frankly, is that processing is the key. So there's going to be some big winners out there, and we'd like them to be in New Jersey. And there's going to be losers if they grow it and they can't take it to market where it needs to go. And that's what we're doing here. And so we have a whole program. Invite anyone. We have some indoor growers that are already started now, and they're pretty large in it in terms of some of the products that they make or consumer products. Just saying that if you have any notion that you might want to get involved with that, please come see us, because we are the sole for that. It's our program totally. Joe, you have anything?
No, I think you summed that up very good.
All right, that's good. Do we have any other questions? I saw we got a couple through, as Joe said, through the chat mechanism here, but I just didn't know if anyone on the line here has any questions of either Jen, Joe, or Doug. I presume everyone was being on mute. Okay. Again, Jen, Secretary Fisher, Joe, we appreciate your time. I think this will be recorded. It'll be put on Facebook. So if you didn't get a chance, you had to jump off or you had to, multitask, you can see it there. Otherwise, we have a couple upcoming programs. One is on digital transformation. It's on June 23rd. The other is the impact of reentry on real estate, which is held on June 29th. I would tell you to take a look at New Jersey Food Processors Association website. You'll see those items, those events, and anything else that or any other questions we could ask or answer from the association. If those on the phone have associates or businesses you deal with who are more inquisitive, have any questions, would be like become a member of the associations, please reach out to myself or Michelle or any other of the board members, any other members for that matter. And I always encourage our existing members, if you can, as you attend these, if you have a company you deal with, whether it's a distributor or processor or even ancillary service company supporting food processors and distributors, see if you can get them interested, because as we build out the organization, the more distributors and processors we have, the stronger organizations, the more resources we can provide our constituents. But other than that, Michelle, I don't know if you're coming back on, but again, I thank everyone, the presenters, for their time. as well as those who are online. We appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to spend it with us.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
It's great to be here. I just wanted to say, Secretary Fisher, that yes, the food processors, you know, I know that we have to really work to make people understand just how valuable and important food processing is in this state. And sometimes people are so busy doing what they're doing that you don't often always have the opportunity to do that. And that's where obviously your association comes in, because we're talking about multi-billions of dollars in the state. And sometimes people miss that fact. As I learned over the years, everyone likes to grab a piece of what somebody else is doing and add it into their own statistics. We actually came up with the food complex New Jersey several years ago. We could strike a number that says it's $115 billion if you were to take tourism, restaurant, hospitality, food manufacturing, food, you know, the food supply itself and growing of fruits and vegetables in any number of ways. But what happens is many times different areas will grab off a piece of what it is that food manufacturing represents and the food complex in the state, because we have an extraordinary history and we have a mass that's there, and we have to constantly tell this story so people understand, whether it's the fishing, you know, the multi-billion-dollar fishing industry, or whether it's the farm industry, whether it's the processors yourselves. We're all processing all these products, and they're all food. And as we all say, everybody eats. So we want to make sure that we can tell that story, and you're a very important part of that.
Well, we appreciate that, Secretary Fisher, and you know we try to do that, and this organization, what we're trying to do is find ourselves in more strategic partnerships with other similar like-minded organizations, whether it be the Food Council or the Pennsylvania Food Merchants. So you know, that's what this organization tries to do, because it takes a village. So you know, not one organization is going to be able to, you know, support New Jersey. So hopefully we can put together the right partnerships and be a bigger part of the solution.
Thank you for having us.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.